On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Matt Martin. He is a co-founder at Clockwise. We're going to be talking about his story and his journey from being a lawyer to CEO. And in between, he moved into software engineering. And we're going to talk to him about, that shift, transitioning, giving up some of that security of law to move into software development and being self-taught. And we're going to talk to him about, how that's going to, impact his intangibles that he's carried into his career from being a lawyer. I mean, obviously have different skill sets than if you went through a traditional computer science program. Matt, super excited to have you on the show. Appreciate it.
Stoked to be here. It should be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Before we start, tell everyone what Clockwise does.
So at Clockwise, we provide every knowledge worker a kind of personal AI-based calendar assistant. So we help you get a better schedule, both automatically and proactively. So what that looks like is we analyze your schedule when you sign up. You can sign up with your Google Calendar, your Outlook calendar by yourself. You don't need your whole team on there to start. We'll analyze your calendar and surface ways that we can get your schedule closer to a schedule that you actually want.
All right. I mean, that's got to be an interesting product within the engineering space alone. So we will save that for a different day. Today, it's about you and your personal journey, obviously, to being a co-founder at Clockwise. So I guess just to start off, I think give us a little background. So obviously, I mentioned you were a lawyer. Kind of tell us a little bit of that, history before we dive into, the progress and the transition.
Yeah, I'll give you kind of a 30,000 foot overview, and then we can dive in wherever it's interesting. But just to give the audience their bearings. So the way that I got into law was I actually in college was super interested in public policy and politics. I was a government major, poli-sci major. And funny enough, there was actually a point of intersection between technology and politics in my kind of career advancement. And it's a specific moment, and this will date me, but it was in the early 2000s when I was in college, and I worked at my then senator's office in DC, and I had a really great time. And as I was leaving, I was doing kind of an exit interview and asking the chief of staff there what I could do to keep involved, because my college campus was pretty remote. And he recommended starting a political blog. And I had built websites many, many times, and I thought, all right, sure, I'll give this a whirl. And so I ran and operated this political website that got quite popular, and leveraged that into a bunch of things in politics. And everybody in politics seems to be a lawyer. Not literally everybody, but pretty much. And so I went to law school thinking, okay, I want to go to public policy and do this. But that initial seed of it wasn't the first seed of my love for technology, but being able to run this website, operate it, I got bit by a bug where I just wanted to keep building. And so kind of as I was in law school, while I was getting closer to my legal degree, I was getting farther away from wanting to pursue it. And so I did practice for a year or two, but it was almost just really poor timing on my part because I had already paid for that law school degree. But realized this building side was what I really wanted to do and was passionate about.
It's interesting because obviously you mentioned you go through, it's a process, it's extra education, extra costs, all that. You decide to continue with it. I guess as you kind of had the bug and you knew that you could do other things, when you balance that decision at the time, right? Because I think in hindsight, you're a co-founder now of a great startup. We can always look back and see that stuff. At the time, when you were thinking about, do I want to continue? Do I not want to continue with law? There's got to be those thoughts of, I am going into the unknown. I'm giving up what could be very easy, high six-figure salary for a very long time. I mean, do those things at that time go through your mind? Are those things you're considering, or is it self-realization that you just aren't fulfilled with potentially continuing with law?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, the degree of self-doubt that seeps in there. Because I won't swear on your podcast, but it's kind of like who the heck am I to think that I can make this transition? I don't have training in computer science. I know my way around a website, but this isn't what I really know how to do. And I am trained as a lawyer, and it is very secure. And I think it's important when talking about these sort of life moments to put them in context a little bit. And I don't mean this in a touchy-feely, whatever sort of way, but just brass tacks. I'm really lucky. I I wasn't saddled with economic circumstances where I had to take that salary. Like, yes, I had the sunk cost of that law degree. Yes, it was expensive. Yes, there's that future earning potential. But also, like, for a lot of the people that I went to law school with and I was, starting my legal career with, it would have been straight up impossible for them to jump ship at that point, just given the amount of debt from law school and the amount of earning potential. They had early families, but I was pretty young. I didn't have kids yet. The debt was manageable. And so for me, yes, it was scary, but the thing that was honestly scarier for me, and maybe this is just the naivete of youth, but like I looked down the hallway in my law firm and I could see exactly where I would be in 30 years. I mean, it's a very secure path. It's also pretty damn linear. People jump to in-house, they do different things. Not everybody with a law degree ends up being a partner at a law firm, but by and large, you end up being a partner at a large law firm, and that's what you do for your career. And that scared me more than anything. That I couldn't imagine waking up, in 30 years and being in the same place. So it's a very intense decision. But on the balance, it's just like, how do I want to spend my time? How do I want to spend my life?
That's really interesting, because I think at that stage, or being younger, having that self-realization of looking 30 years in the future, that's impressive. I think you mentioned having the security of not being saddled with some of that debt, family, you can manage it and all that stuff. I think that's all important. I think to be able to flash forward and kind of see in the future where the path leads, I don't think everyone can do that, because obviously we might make different decisions. So I think that's really interesting that you were able to kind of peek and look at that. I guess, when you look at the flip side of that, you could see down the hallway, you could see where your career is going to be in 30 years. You've done some websites, you've done some of that stuff, but how was the gap from going, okay, I have the bug, I like technology, to I'm going to give up this path and actually build the skills to actually be proficient in a whole different industry? I guess just talk to us a little bit about how that went through your mind at the time.
Yeah, there's so many learnings along the way. I mean, I'll kind of structure this into three different areas. One is, if I had earlier role models and understanding of what that career path looks like, I probably would have never gone to law school. So I'll come back to that one. The second is, if I had known at that juncture when I was moving away from law how hard it would be to find a job, not right away, but actually in 3 years, I might not have left. But then the third, which I'll start with, is just like, look, like I think at that point, we're talking 2010, 2011. I had done a lot of stuff on the web. I built a lot of stuff in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and I just loved it. Like, there's just like, you kind of know what you love. Like, you lose track of time, you get sucked into it, you just go deep. You can't help thinking about it. It's what I did in my free time. And just the stark contrast between that and what I was doing in my day job. I do have an academic love for the law, but it's very intellectual. The practice of it, nobody calls their lawyer on their best day. It's a very transactional business. It's service oriented, and like a lot of what you're doing is just trying to engineer the least bad outcome, instead of actually push things forward. And so it was just like that contrast was very clear to me in that moment. But again, like, if it's of interest, I'll go backwards to that step about, like, if I had known how hard it would be to find the next job.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear that.
So one thing that's kind of interesting that happened, and I didn't realize it at the time, but coming right out of that transition, I'd given up any notion of needing a certain salary. I just wanted to get into the industry in any way, shape, or form. My then girlfriend and I, now wife, moved to the Bay Area together, and I was just looking for whatever. And at that point, people could look at a resume and probably self-select whether or not they wanted to talk to me on a very clear set of criteria, because they're looking at a resume like, this law school lawyer wants to be in tech. Like, who the hell is this? And so if they reached out to talk to me, I didn't realize it this time, but in retrospect, if they reached out to talk to me, I'd already been filtered. Like, if you wanted to take a bet on me, I was eager. I think I'm relatively bright. I was willing to do whatever. And so I found a couple roles. They weren't glamorous roles, but I found a couple roles at startups that I was excited about and took them. It was actually the next hop that was really, really difficult and actually pretty emotionally trying, because I had taken a couple stints early on at startups. I had been doing biz dev at one place. I transitioned. I was doing, like product on my resume, but it was an early legal tech startup and we couldn't get the thing off the ground. So we weren't hiring. So I started to do more and more software engineering, which was a blessing in disguise. I didn't realize at the time I had so much imposter syndrome, but I got to do coding, actually in my day job. When that failed, this next job hunt was just brutal, because now I kind of maybe looked like I could do software. You can look at the resume and be like, okay, the most recent stint, he built some stuff. I had a portfolio website up where I showed off some of the side projects I had done and the work that I've been working on. But I didn't have a CS degree, and my experience was pretty light. And so there, I got pulled into a lot of conversations where I just got rejected, either in the first conversation or after a coding interview. That wore me down. I thought about going to law back to that point, just because then you're unemployed for a while. I was doing contracting gigs on the side and really start soul searching questions about your ability, about was I way too ambitious in trying to make this hop? Fortunately, the right company found me at the right time, and the rest is history. But I don't think that was a foregone conclusion.
That's really interesting, because I think of all the places you could have moved to, the Bay Area is probably one of the most competitive. I mean, it's where the sports played at the highest level, one of the highest levels, and I think probably one of the hardest places to get past some of those screens and get. I mean, you run a company, you know the hiring criteria. I guess an interesting question, if we were going to just flash forward for a second. I mean, you do have what would be considered a diverse background, right? You don't have that standard CS degree. You're a lawyer. You practice law, self-taught. Do your views when it comes to hiring change? Do you see diversity differently, having gone through some of those struggles yourself?
Yeah, I think I do. I sometimes joke with my team, and it's like, I say it as a joke, but actually there's some truth behind it. It's like, man, I don't think that I would ever have gotten hired here, 10 years ago. Cause there's a certain industry inertia to how interviewing happens. And so if you don't try to inject a different viewpoint into it, you hire bright people, you hire people with CS degrees, you hire strong engineers, and they're going to kind of do what they've seen. And so, especially early on in Clockwise, I would inject myself in that process and keep an eye out for the soft skills and qualities that I really like to see in people who maybe don't have the strongest resume from a coding perspective. And we actually put one of those as one of our values. One of our company values is enthusiasm. And it sounds like kind of a fun value to have on a piece of paper, but what it really means to me, and what I try to inject into the hiring process, is I care so deeply about people, and when you see them when they come in and they just love what they're doing, and it's kind of hard to even qualify, because that everybody expresses that differently. Like you don't have to be an extrovert to express that. You could be really silent and just really care about the syntax of how you're laying out your code, or you can really care about where exactly this pixel is going to go, or what shadow you're going to use on this element. But you see it, and it's not, to me, it's not quite craft. People talk about craft a lot, and I think that that's important as well. But if somebody has enthusiasm about the work, they will power through a lot. They will power through learning a lot. They will power through adversity. They will power through challenges, and they will just figure it out. And the second thing that I would say is that there's a big difference between hiring for a startup and hiring for a more established company. And everybody says this, and the larger companies would like to say that they hire like startups do, and startups would like to say they're more professional than they are. But you need a high degree of scrappiness, overused term, but you don't want to hire for stability and conservatism. So you need a little bit of that, somebody who's going to like push. And I like non-traditional backgrounds for that, because you kind of you kind of haven't learned your way into conservative practices. You're still a little bit, you might be a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit naive, but sometimes great solutions can come from that.
I like that a lot. And I think I like how it's kind of woven into some of the fabric of Clockwise. Obviously, technology over the last decade has gotten more complex, more moving parts, more specialization within different parts of the stack. I guess as we kind of are seeing a lot of discussions around, code automation tools, we're seeing all these different, ideas where large language models might help with the facilitation. Obviously, you had to go through the hard parts yourself, and I don't know where that's going to fit in. I don't think people are quite sure how it's going to fit in. It's obviously producing something, but not there. But if we were to flash forward and look at this role, being self-taught, you've gone through it, having tools to help you write some of the heavy lifting. What happens to people that are going to want to get into technology down the road as these tools get more mature? What are your thoughts on that?
I have hopes. I don't know if they'll come to fruition, but I have hopes, and I think they're possible, which is that it becomes much more accessible to a wider group of people. One of the things that really helped me out is that when I was growing up in the 90s, with a text editor and a server somewhere and a FTP client, you could put up a website, and you could do it. And you can do it largely by inspecting the source of other websites. You copy paste and you learn how the syntax of HTML works, and then CSS comes along, and it's like, people love to joke that it is a ball of yarn at this point for sure, but it was accessible and understandable, and you can inspect it in the browser and figure out how it works. What I feel like I got into the industry by the skin of my teeth is because that window kind of closed in the early 2000s and early 2010s, when we moved much more towards building robust applications in the web. And I love it. I love that happened. I feel grateful that I got in. But man, go try to inspect the source of any web application, and as like a new novice self-taught person, your eyes are gonna roll over, and you have no idea. You're blessed even if it's not minified. So it's really tough, and I think that I lamented that quite a bit because I didn't see a path for people like me that were just really passionate kind of hobbyists to pick that up. YouTube helps a lot. You can learn a lot of stuff on your own, but it's just manifestly different. I think with the advent of LLMs, there are two possibilities, and the reality is probably both are true, just at different ends of the spectrum. One is it's a really enabling technology because you can learn again, kind of copy and pasting. And what's really great about it is that when I used to copy paste, JavaScript for Moo tools, sometimes I didn't even know the underpinnings or how JavaScript is actually working. I would just copy it blindly and then learn how it didn't work or did work, and I had no knowledge of whether it was efficient or good. But you can actually talk to the LM. And so I think, if somebody's passionate and they want to use the LM not just as a way to enable them to get fast code, but also as a way to enable them understanding practices, it's actually pretty amazing. And I think, look, I'm biased, but I think better than most CS courses, because there's nothing better than trying to create something for learning. And if you can create it side by side and get instruction on what you're trying to create, I think it's pretty amazing. Now, the opposite end of that, and I do think that the industry will kind of bifurcate. You're going to have kind of a specialized class of people who really understand how these tools work under the hood. And it's not just the LLM engineers, but I do think that there will be an increased premium for engineers who really understand how to code at scale, and how to really hard optimize tough problems. Because what are LLMs right now? They're aggregate knowledge. And so specialized knowledge is going to be, I think, increasingly premium as you get this swath of people who can do kind of the easier lower end. But at the easier lower end, you also get to specialize and differentiate yourself on different axes. So if your technical proficiency isn't super high, it enables a whole set of people who maybe really care tons about the UI or really have tons of knowledge in a specific vertical area. And so I don't know. I think I hope it's democratizing, but we'll find out.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think both those potentially could be true at the same time, and I think I think maybe the interesting thing that hasn't happened to software development, software engineering, is a lot of industries have seen technology bring efficiencies, but code writing has typically been in the hands of really astute problem solvers who could break down big problems into small, understand those syntax nuances, understand how systems fit, and all of a sudden providing them with heavy lifting tools, which has never really been an opportunity before. I think it's going to be interesting to see where that heavy lifting falls and where they go with that, because I'm not sure, if this fast forwards in 5 years into such an efficient tool, do you need to spend all that time in a sprint coding? And could you be doing something else? Do other people like yourself get the opportunity to come in there and add value, especially if you have functional knowledge? I think those would be really interesting paths forward, but obviously really early days.
Yeah, I'll give you another example because it really breaks down the barriers between disciplines and language specialization. So I wanted to cut up like a side project in this, like over Thanksgiving, an idea for an app in iOS, and I kind of understand Swift, but I'm not a Swift programmer. Like I don't know it in and out, and so like if I try to do that without Claude and ChatGPT by my side, I would have gotten the like base file set up and then probably walked away. But like I got something pretty functional, like pretty quickly, because the concepts between the base understanding of software engineering, there are a lot of universal concepts, and how to apply it in a specific language is really domain knowledge that LLMs are pretty good at translating. And even again, like having that teacher side by side, I think that some people are more skeptical about the capabilities of LLMs, bristle a little bit at the idea of like using aggregate knowledge off of a bunch of Stack Overflow questions to like actually code up a solution. But the magic, I think, is not just getting speedier code completion, fancier code completion, but actually being asked questions. Like, I was asking questions about like how what are best practices for structuring iOS applications in Swift, like in terms of file structure, which is like classically an area that my nerd brain goes in rabbit holes at the start of projects all the time. And to be able to get like quick answers was great. It was awesome.
I'd add I had a mentor who I work with, Ross Glennon, out in Australia. He actually said something to me that stuck, and I think it's going to fit within this conversation in the world of LLMs. He said, you can judge expertise by the questions someone can ask. And I think we'll see a tool respond differently depending on the expertise and the types of questions you can ask, because obviously you'll look for the nuances, you'll understand where the bodies are buried before you ask the question, if you already know, as it were. I guess final question for you. I am kind of curious, this transition, I love the learnings. When you look back and what you've carried forward, obviously having that law degree, we talked about a diverse mindset, looking for things differently. Outside of that, being legally trained, are there some clear intangibles that move into being a co-founder, CEO in the engineering space that you could touch on?
I get asked this question a fair amount, and I will give you an answer that, I don't know, tries to bridge in an honest way. But the like blunt answer is not much. Like it's and the answer that's like kind of a bridge is that I do think that law teaches a certain style of thinking. It is very structured. I mean, like you can make an analogy to code in some ways. Like the legal system is kind of an encoded set of rules over time, encoded much differently. A lot of it's actually in case law and not in statutes, and so like you have to pick out the patterns and like. Well, literally, some of it is like hypertext linking between different, citations and docs. And so like it does establish kind of a style of thinking that I think is beneficial. It also adds a little bit of knowledge of legal concepts. And I think one of the things that I really carry forward to the practice of a startup is that the advice that I get from lawyers or that I get on approach really is advice. They're experts in their area and providing expert advice, but the reality is that any specific decision is a trade-off, not just against like what the legal. I mean, sometimes there are hard and fast rules, like you just can't do X, Y, or Z. But a lot of the times it's nuanced on like what's the balance of cost benefit. And I think it's been helpful to be able to see it that way and to be able to say, well, you know what? Like, I think that the benefit is way higher than the cost here. We're just going to roll with it, and I'm not going to pay attention to this. The flip side of that, though, like honestly, like law also trains you to be pretty conservative. Again, like a lot of legal practice is trying to engineer the least bad outcome for your client. And so you're protecting against risk all the time. And that's almost the polar opposite of starting a company. Like you have to optimize for upside, not optimize for minimization of downside. And so like in some ways the legal training is actually pretty bad for startup thinking. So I don't know. I mean, like it's a part of my whole being and who I am now. So I don't regret it. And it was interesting and engaging. But I certainly wouldn't advise anybody who wants to go to startups to get a law degree first.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, everything you said absolutely resonates, makes sense. I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us all. If somebody wants to reach out to you, obviously you do have a diverse background, moving into engineering, now CEO. If somebody does want to pick your brain or want to continue the conversation, is there a good way of connecting with you?
Yeah, two forums that are really great. One is basic. It's my email address. It's Matt, M-A-T-T, at getclockwise.com. If anybody wants like personalized advice or outreach, I try my best to reply to emails. Just mention that you heard about me on this podcast and, we'll strike up a conversation, hopefully. If you want to more kind of follow along with areas that I talk about or the Clockwise journey, LinkedIn's actually the best. Right now with the social media environment, I find that that's the best place for talking about business trends for whatever reason. So that's what we publish.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you for your time. Again, thank you for being on. We'll get some of those links in the show notes and appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I thought this was a great journey story. Obviously, from lawyer to co-founder within the engineering space, being self-taught, a lot of learning lessons. I think Matt shared a lot of, his insights from those decisions. He had to make the point-in-time decisions. He didn't know what the results would be, but he took the risks and it's worked out, and I think it's a great story. So share this with somebody else who might be looking to pivot their career or just interested in hearing his journey. I think is fantastic. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.